Far too many women are battling addiction behind closed doors, carrying the weight of silence, shame, and the fear of what asking for help might cost them. For mothers especially, the thought of leaving their children for treatment can feel impossible. On this episode of Addiction Talk, Expert Insights, Ari Chelli, Clinical Director at Desert Hope Treatment Center, gets personal about her journey from addiction to advocacy. She discusses the barriers that keep women stuck and what can be done to help more women get the support they deserve. Expert Insights starts now.
And welcome to Addiction Talk, Expert Insights. I'm joined by Ari Chelli. She is the clinical director at Desert Hope Treatment Center in Las Vegas, and we wanted to have her on. This is near and dear to us as we head close to Mother's Day, and it's a topic that we really wanted to get out there. So thank you for joining us to not only share more about your own personal story and recovery, but to provide the community insight on the topic of women and mothers who are struggling with addiction.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It's always a really great day when I get to talk about things I'm passionate about, and I love the community. I love women in recovery, so it's a good day.
Well, what I think makes you unique, Ari, is your ability to have the experience of recovery, having struggled yourself, but also having a clinical perspective. Tell me about how your own personal journey kind of led you to the path that you are today to help others who are struggling with this.
Sure. I think for me personally, when I started this recovery process, I realized that being of service was really the thing for me that gave me self-esteem. It made me feel better about myself. And I loved watching the growth happen in other people. And so I didn't really know where I was going to land. I started as a behavioral tech in the field, and I knew I wanted to go back to school. I wasn't sure at what capacity, and I just kind of kept going, and one thing led to another. And that's the thing I try to explain to patients and people who are newer than myself in recovery, is that it's such an organic process when you're doing the work. It's really hard to teach people about that kind of faith, and not in like the biblical way, but just in the, faith in yourself and your own efficacy. And so it's been a really great experience, and I'm very happy of the work we do here at Desert Hope, and I'm happy how we're able to help the community.
So tell me about how your personal experience has even shaped how you care for patients. Has it made you more sensitive, do you think, because you can see yourself in them sometimes, or how has it affected how you react or support patients?
I think for me, when I start getting pretty emotional doing this work is when I'm dealing with the parents. I think that I try really to go above and beyond. I know that my parents had a lot of support when I was in my active addiction, and I just, want to support the parents as much as I possibly can, because it's difficult. I'm a mother myself, and I couldn't imagine having to set those difficult boundaries. And so I have just such empathy for the families. And also with the patients, I just have, this hope. I know that if I could, have the life that I have today, which is I'm incredibly grateful for and so happy, I know that anyone can have that. And so those two aspects, this kind of extreme empathy for the family who is also suffering, and this kind of unwavering hope for the clients have really is the driving factor to most of the practices and the way I implement a clinical work.
And I think that's so important, because people feel like when they come to Desert Hope for care and they see you, that you're someone who gets it. And I know that is probably so reassuring to so many patients. But one of the things I think is interesting that we found that even though your story is very powerful, you have a powerful recovery story, you've taken what you went through and now use it to help others. But a lot of women, unfortunately, don't seek treatment, particularly mothers. And we're finding that, when you look at across most treatment centers, they're primarily men. Why do you think that women often are not seeking treatment at the same numbers that men often do?
So it's a really big question, and there's a lot of parts to it. First, I just want to say historically, our treatment of women in mental health and behavioral health, even the word hysteria comes from the Greek word uterus, which means that there's something specific to women that cause this type of emotional distress. So just even this very primitive understanding that it's not the behavior, it's something that's actually wrong with this person internally. As opposed to men, you'll see more of an acceptance that it's the behavior, it was a bad decision, it was a bad choice, not necessarily something inherently wrong with the males. So there's that. That's one specific thing. Another thing is just in general, because women have historically stayed home and men have provided, in these more kind of traditional nuclear settings, that kind of lack of independence has really given men the ability to kind of safeguard women historically. And I would say more modernly, one of the issues that we have here is I think that with women in general, there's this kind of inherent understanding that for women to leave their children to take care of themselves, it's considered selfish. And so as opposed to, I think with men, it's more expected for men to be autonomous from the family because they have to go out and go to work. And even though it's changed, obviously, I think there's still this kind of inherent bias that we have when we look at a man seeking treatment as opposed to a woman. So there's a lot of things at play. There's a lot more things, but I think generally speaking, if you look at the history of how women have been treated, and also society, how women have kind of been in the home, and even all of the historical treatments that we've had, it's typically all those studies are done on males. So I think there's many big things in play, and I know a lot of times here what I hear from women is I have to go home and I have to help my kids. That's something I hear really often. So.
And you know what is so interesting about that is that oftentimes women do that. We take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. We take care of the kids or the husband or whatever. And so a lot of times the women will suffer and not get the help they need. What do you wish more women understood about how going to treatment is not only taking care of the family, but you're still taking care of yourself? Because I think they feel like, oh, I have to leave or go away, or maybe people will look at me differently. But the impact of when they do seek help or they do get what they need through treatment and transform their lives, or, deal with the addiction they're facing, it can be transformative for the whole family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good point. I think for the first portion of that, what I really want women to know is that you are not available to your family in your active addiction, period. There's no way. You cannot be in active addiction and emotionally be there. You cannot you're probably not even engaging in safe practices at home. I mean, if you're using and you need treatment, you're probably driving under the influence with your children in the car. There's so many at-risk situations, even cooking with the stove on, and then if you're drinking and you've had too many and now the stove is on. So I think from a safety aspect, I want them to realize that. But then from an emotional aspect, children are very intuitive. So children might not have the language. They might not have the language, but for survival of children, they need to emotionally be able to read situations so they can know if they're safe or not. And they know when mom is not emotionally available for them. They know when a mom is preoccupied with doing X, Y, and Z, as opposed to giving undivided attention to the kids. People always say, my kids are going to know them. My kids are going to know. Your kids already know. They might not have a name for it. They might not have the language for it, but they know that this connection, that connection to the caregiver, the primary caregiver, is not secure. And so, so I would say that for the first part of it. The second part of it, you had said something about you don't want people to know externally, maybe outside the family. And we have a saying in recovery. We say, you can't save your ass and your face at the same time. So I think this is a really good point. You know, what's important is what the person next door thinks is important, or is, you know, raising a healthy family and being healthy for your family and for yourself, is that more important? So just kind of reshifting values to understanding that what other people think of you is not as important as how you feel about yourself and what you think about yourself.
I love that saying. And you hit on some really critical things, because I think a woman feeling like I'm going away, I'm abandoning my children or my family, but being in a relationship with your kids, you're still abandoning them in some ways when you're not showing up as your full self. So it's just really how you look at it. I also wonder about denial, because there are probably a lot of women who say, well, yeah, it's not that bad. I'm fine. You know, sometimes I might get drunk, or, you know, I've just been taking these pills to help me sleep. I don't really have a problem. Do you find that also there is a denial component when it comes to people even realizing that they need help, or that they think that they have to hit this like rock bottom moment in their mind to make them say, oh, now it's the time?
It's a really good point. I know we say rock bottom a lot. And, you know, well, I give everybody permission to seek treatment before they hit rock bottom. It's a lot easier for us to build you up when you haven't been, you know, completely destroyed by this disease. And so I give everybody permission. And I will also say, if you're in a position where you're justifying why you're not in need of treatment, you probably need treatment. So you kind of have to have this understanding. If people are telling you, you know, hey, you might want to look at that, or you might need treatment, or if you're feeling like people are emotionally attacking you because they're, you know, trying to breach the topic with you, I would say that in itself is an indication that you should need treatment. You don't have to be completely wiped out spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally from this illness before you seek treatment. And another thing too that's really important is, it's always something to remember. It's always the one thing you're not doing that allows you to not qualify. So for example, if, let's just say, someone is an alcoholic and they drink on the weekends, right? They binge drink on the weekends. Then they're going to say, well, I don't drink every night. And then someone who's an alcoholic and drinks every night says, well, I don't drink in the morning and at night. So we're always looking to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it so that we don't have to qualify. And so that is innate within, that's the human condition. So if you find yourself having those conversations with yourself, it's probably time.
And I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and I want to hit this home, Ari, is that addiction is something that gets worse over time. A lot of people think, well, I'm managing it now. But even if you're managing it right now, that may not always be the case. Does it always happen, Ari, that if this goes untreated, that it gets worse?
This is a chronic progressive illness. Chronic progressive illness. And so I pray that everyone is the exception to the rule. I really, surely do. I have not met an exception to the rule. I've been doing this for over a decade. I've been in recovery even longer. I have yet to meet that exception. So, like I said, you don't have to be completely at a rock bottom place to get the help that you need. And the fact that you are out of some sort of control where you're trying to manage something, you know, other people, if you say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with you drinking in front of me, they just don't drink. It's not a big deal. They're like, okay, I don't have to have a drink tonight. So it's, I think people need to do better what we call reality testing. So, yeah, I think it's a really good point you bring up. And I just think, especially for women, it's most important. When I worked in kids trauma, the kids who suffered more were the kids whose mother were unwell as opposed to the father. And so it's almost like a call to wellness for all the women out there that are listening to this and feel like they might need help. You probably do. If you feel like you need help, and do that, please do that.
And I think the other thing that's really powerful about this is overcoming that guilt and that shame. Like you said, I think if people can get past this and they can move forward in saving themselves, like I love the saying that you said, you can't save your ass and your face at the same time. I mean, you have to make a decision, and it's really about you and thinking about your family. If you really want to be there for your family, this is so important. What do you think families can do? What is your advice to families? So maybe I am the husband who sees this and my wife is like, I'm fine. I don't want to get help. I need to be here for the kids. The kids need me. What role can families play in that support of getting help?
I think that it's a very big topic, and there's lots of answers, but I think the most important one is, families are so hurt. They're so hurt from this, and I think they're really looking to maybe punish, and that's understandable, right? Just because someone is ready to change, right, doesn't mean that the family has to accept that this will be a changed person. So there will be a time where there has to be that kind of reconnection. I would say in the beginning, letting the person know that you have everything at home, that you can handle everything at home. You're going to call on your family resources, whatever that might be. If you have a mother-in-law or your own, the father's mother, the grandparents, siblings in the family that can help with the children. I think really just putting that, the wellness of the mom is priority, and we're going to do whatever we have to do so that you can seek the treatment that you need. And then all of the anguish in the family that's been caused by the addiction, because everybody suffers. It's a family illness. And so that time will come, and to just try to have patience and a lot of grace. It's the hardest thing that anybody can do, and it takes a lot of courage. It's a lot easier to continue to stay in active addiction than it is to face all of the mistakes you've made and all the feelings that you're going to feel. And so it's the most courageous thing anybody can do, and having some compassion for that, I think, is important.
How did you find the courage?
I think my story, for me personally, I think that the consequences got great enough, and I wasn't willing to pay the consequences anymore. And, for me, unfortunately, it looked like everybody kind of turning their back on me. And that's what I needed to realize when I did my own reality testing, that this is a place I don't want to be. This is not what I see for myself. And I went to treatment. I stayed in treatment. I believe in treatment. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. I was fortunate enough to go to sober living. Sober living is an outpatient services is just as important as inpatient, if not more. And so to allow yourself to go through that continuum, I think something too for the families that's really important is that we're not fixing anybody. We're going to take away the substance, and we're going to give a few tools if they can remember them. But the work starts when the substances stop. And so to expect that someone's just going to come back and be the ultimate caregiver, that person's going to need to go to meetings. That person's going to need to get a sponsor. That person's going to need to do all of these self-care things. And it's a lifestyle change, not just a go to treatment for X amount of days and you're fixed.
But it sounds like from your own experience, it's definitely worth it.
Oh my God, I'm so grateful for my life. And I think the most important thing is, for me personally, I've been a person who I could be in a room full of people and always felt really lonely and isolated from people. And in recovery, one of the most beautiful gifts I've gotten in recovery, and there's been many, but something I'm thinking about right now that's very important is I've had a lot of tragedy in recovery. Life starts, it doesn't stop because you enter recovery. And Some of those things I've had to physically face alone, but I never really felt lonely. And it was at that point that I realized, like, I feel connected to people. I have a support group that I can really trust, and I've been able to mend relationships in my family where I felt supported from them. And not that they necessarily weren't supported before, I just didn't feel that way. And so that's kind of when I've noticed the change happen, when I'm in these big moments of tragic situations where people would maybe use over that. I have not used, and I have really leaned into these connections, and to see that my first thought is not to use, but to really lean into my higher power and to the support group I've had. I'm like, wow, I'm really a different person. So that's been a really beautiful experience in these very tragic moments. So.
And as we wrap up this interview, well, first of all, congratulations on your years of sobriety. How many years is it?
11. So
11. Congratulations on 11 years of sobriety. And then I just want us to give like a message, a final message to a woman or a mother who is listening to this. What would you want that final message to be?
I think that they're worth it. You're worth it. And you deserve to have a life of freedom from active addiction. And it's possible. If I can do it, you can do it. So, just call us, give us a call here, and I'll walk you through the process. And I'm always available to talk to another woman who's, trying to find recovery.
And it's not as scary as people think.
No, we have so much support and so much love. The staff here, I have never worked with such compassionate medical staff and nursing and clinicians, and everybody here has been directly impacted by substance use. We got a beautiful compliment yesterday that someone was saying they finally felt like they were treated human when they were here. And I'm like, that is just the most beautiful compliment. So we're just out here doing the best we can to help. And it's scary. It does not have to be that bad. We can help you.
Okay. Well, so nice talking to you. I think, with Mother's Day approaching, this is a perfect topics for us to share. And we thank you for your insight and for your vulnerability around your own story and for all that you're doing for our patients there at Desert Hope. And thank you for being on Addiction Talk, Expert Insights.